Hey, fam. Welcome to Live Stories, everybody. I am so excited to be having today's conversation. I want to get right into it because I think today's conversation is going to be super relevant. We are talking to Zoë Nelson. As you guys know, I like to read their 1 to 2 sentence that introduces us to them. And she writes, I'm a first generation daughter of immigrants and a fierce mother of two, a multi passionate soul and a force for change. My passion for advocacy is deeply rooted in lived experience, shaped by a personal journey through the heartache and hope of congenital heart defects, and driven by a commitment to reimagining better care for the CHD community. So many things I wanted to tangent and already in your bio, but good morning. How are you, Zoë? Thank you so much for joining us today. Yay.
Hi. Good morning, Liv. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for inviting me. I'm beyond excited to have this conversation with you. Yeah.
Yes. And so for our listeners, I really wanted to be intentional about having Zoë on because her story is one that's unique. And a lot of people who tune into the podcast say they listen, not necessarily because they are going through a divorce, but sometimes they say their breakups felt like a divorce. And
Mhm.
so Zoë has a very interesting story to share about her breakup that felt like a divorce. And so I kind of want to go all the way back and kind of ground our listeners, Zoe, to what your understanding was about relationship and marriage.
Yeah, so initially, like growing up, I came from a two-parent household. My
Mm-hmm.
parents both, maybe a little background there, but my two-parent
Yeah.
household, both of my parents grew up in the Caribbean. They both
Mm-hmm.
immigrated to the United States, so they're here trying to create a better life for myself and
Yeah.
my two brothers. So like my sense of like what relationships look like was it definitely had to look like a two family household. It was that's
Mm-hmm.
the best way that the kids were going to get support. That's just like, what you saw across TV. Initially, when I looked at
Mm-hmm.
family growing up when I was in high school, I saw everything that my mom did. I saw everything that my dad did. I saw everything that they had to go through, not only as immigrants, but just living their lives and then raising us. And I'm just like, well, I don't know
Mm-hmm.
if I want kids. I don't know if I want a family. And at that point, that was like back in high school. And then as it started to evolve and I started to get into relationships of my own, I'm like, okay, like this is ideally what I would like. I would like to be in a relationship and start a family and
Mm-hmm.
really mirror what my parents had because like they did
Mm-hmm.
everything together. They still do everything together.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought for me like that's what I wanted and that's how it should have been mirrored.
Yeah, that's very helpful. So you said us. So how many siblings do you have?
I have two younger
Oh, so
siblings.
you're the
Yeah,
oldest. Okay,
I'm
got
the
it.
oldest. Yeah.
Yeah. I think what's so interesting, and people need to remember, even if you have kids, that, and there's a saying, I believe, I think either I heard it or saw it on social around this idea that things are caught, not taught. Meaning that,
Hmm.
as kids are growing up, and if you are a young kid, they're watching what their parents are going through and doing. And even though we don't realize, they're actually thinking and taking that on. And I believe that's what's called modeling. So
Yeah.
we can talk a lot about, do as I say, but really and truly, young kids are watching. And not only are they watching, they're also assigning meaning to what they see in a household. They're looking at their parents and they don't know any better. So they're looking at parents as like, okay, I guess this is what's going to be my future. Or they're assessing of whether or not, yeah, I'm not going to be able to do that. Right. So I guess when we talk about kind of like your upbringing and you see the two parent household, were there things that you saw, at least on your mom's side, that you thought like, that's interesting? Or were there any kind of like troubling things you saw in your household growing up?
I would
Mm-hmm.
say more so like the expectation of so my mom it was very traditional
Okay.
roles when it came
Mm-hmm.
to like mother, father, male, female, whereas my dad was the primary breadwinner. He was the
Got
one
it.
that was working. He had several jobs and then my mom was in the household, but also she also did work.
Yeah.
So while it was still traditional, there was still that piece that she was also out working and contributing to the
Mm-hmm.
family. And that's why early on I did notice how much work that took. I did notice how
Mm-hmm.
much effort and at sometimes draining it was to her.
Yeah.
And that's why early on I was like, well, I don't know if I want kids. I don't know if I want a family, because I see how much it took out of her in raising 3 kids, working, and then having to be a partner at the same time. Because there were times where, like, it was just, you can tell that the household was overwhelmed, because it was just a lot that was going on, a lot of different aspects going along. So yeah, so I did notice like times where, like, and even now, like my mom, like I think back to those moments and those, how my mom was able to like manage all of that, and still be able to have a relationship with my dad, and they're still married today. But you know what that looks like and what that takes, and the ups and downs and the roller coaster. So for them, like, you know, it's very, very hard work.
Yeah. And I think people don't really grasp, you said, what that takes, because what it takes to be able to have a full-time job, be able to support 3 kids, but also to, now that I get older, I don't know if you find this true, like I have my own things too that I sometimes have to put on the back burner, and that's the sacrifice that comes with parenting and parenthood. And so that notion of what it takes to be in a healthy relationship, it is a lot of hard work, and it is a lot of sacrifice, I would say, right? And so I want to get into the relationship that we're going to discuss today. Give us some grounding of, like, how long were you in this relationship? What were the first kind of moments like for you as you started in the relationship? Kind of talk us through that journey.
Yeah, so my relationship, and this is the father of my children. I started, it was 7 years long. So it started in 2012. And at that point, really young. I think at that point I was like 22. So my expectations, and this is coming from like, not even necessarily said, it was kind of like an unsaid thing from family. It's like, okay, so now that you've gone through college, your next step is getting a good job and having a family. So like that was like on my mind at that time. I'm like, okay, well, like, then these are the next steps. So the partner that I had, we had been together for 2 years before my daughter was born. There were talks about marriage and getting together, you know, having that full commitment of marriage. And at that time, for me, because I was still young, I was like, well, I'm 20, 25. We have some time. Like, we don't necessarily have to get married. Like, we have a child together. We're living together. Like, it's okay. Like, in my mind, that's like, I kind of was just like, I was good with the commitment of us being together outside of marriage. And then for my family, that wasn't necessarily okay. They would have, because my parents got married as soon as they found out that I was going to be born. So like for them, marriage was very important. And for me, I guess it was kind of just a little bit of like, well, I don't have to do it the way you do it. A little bit of like rebellious, I guess, energy there. And so, yeah, I didn't get married. I didn't put pressure on it. So, but we did live, like I said, we did live together.
Okay.
So yeah, that's where it first started and began, and everything kind of was just like, I would say at that point in that time, smooth. But looking back on it, there was like red flags of him not being like responsible. You know, little things at that point where I was just like, he could have been more responsible. He could have been more responsive. Like at that point, I believe I should have asked for marriage. I feel like knowing his level of commitment, and if he really did commit to that, like if like me being in that moment and asking, say, like, let's get married, and sharing that commitment together, I think if I had asked him at that point, he definitely would have said no, and maybe that would have opened up some other conversations as to why, and maybe other conversations as to like, you know, what's more, do our values actually align? What is going on? What's truly going on between us? Like, can we envision a life where we can build together?
Yeah.
So it may have triggered some of those conversations earlier on, as opposed to just like, oh, you know, it's fine.
Yeah, no. Oh my God. All right, let's park here for a few, because I have so many questions. So I'm just putting myself in your shoes and helping the listeners also kind of frame up what was happening. College, dating him. In your mind, you're like, college, got a boo, we got a boo. And then it's like job, and then potential marriage, potential family, but you're not running, you're not racing, right?
Right.
Dating guy and get pregnant, and you're fine with let's live together, let's have the family. But you said something that's, I think I want to park at, is the red flags. What, and now this is hindsight. Don't you wish hindsight was like right there? Because you're
Oh yeah.
like, but
All the time.
the choices are the choices. We know, we learn from our choices. So what were some of those red flags that you now know are red flags?
Yeah, so I would say definitely not having early discussions about your values. And then when in talking to someone, and I'm putting this into my relationships now, is I kind of like almost vomited what I wanted from a person, right? So everything was just coming out like, I want this in a relationship, and I expect this in a partner. So instead of that person coming to me with like, who they truly are, what was happening was he was just mimicking like what I wanted to see. And then in the end, because that's not truly who he was, he could not keep up with that. And then that's when things started to happen. So like, I really wish my younger self knew to have these conversations. Like, don't be afraid to ask for like, what's your expectation on like family, what's your expectation, race, like pulling all of these things in so that you really have an idea of who this person is as a whole. I mean, not to say things are going to change, but at least in that moment, I feel like I would have had a better idea.
Girl, I mean, this episode right here, because like this idea, because I think, and I want to be gentle with ourselves. We didn't know any better, right? But in our minds, I think we think that this little bit of life that we've lived helps us for the long run, right? And not even realize values are huge and important. If you don't know where someone stands, and if you don't ask those kinds of questions, then you're kind of setting yourself for failure, because you don't actually know what you like or dislike as well. So it's almost like we have what we think are our values, which sometimes change or not, but then there's another person who may not even know their values. And so, but we don't know to ask. We don't know what's like a deal breaker or not until you tried and you lived a little bit, pun on the name, and also too, you kind of like get a sense for your internal kind of gut conscience, whatever you want to call it, that then says, you know what, I'm not for that. You also said something that this idea of being afraid. What do you think that fear was based from, of not asking or not waiting to see the person's values? You were like, I was afraid. Do you have any sense of what
I would
that was
say,
driving?
yeah. At least I know for me, like sometimes it's just like that feeling of being alone. And like, you're like, well, this person it's not so bad. And like,
That bad.
I love them, and we get along great. And, and especially at that point, I mean, like I said, I was 22. So like, what was I doing? I was going out, and we weren't really in the nitty gritty of family life, where you're incorporating a child. So once the child comes, it's a whole new dynamic. So I knew him outside of having a child. So like, but yeah, so going back to your question, just like for me, it's just like sometimes that fear of like, okay, well, I'm alone, so what, what am I doing? Like, what is the plan? And it just such a push to, you have to create a family. You're 25 years old, you need to have a baby before you're 30. So like all of these like little pieces that are coming from not only family, but like you're seeing them with friends, you're seeing them at that point, still social media, you're seeing this push of like a woman has a biological timeline. So like, let's get moving. And that's also part of the fear, is like, oh, I need to get started. If I don't get started now, here I am, like I might as well, I don't know if it's going to happen in the future.
Yeah. And I get so mad at not realizing, again, I'm learning to be kind and gracious with myself, that like no one gets to dictate how you live your life. There is no air quote timetable. You need time to figure out yourself. You also need time to figure out what you like, what you don't like. And I think this narrative around like go to school, get a good job, get a family, nowhere in there is like pause to like learn yourself. I think now with like the soft life movement and like, a lot of content we're seeing on social that kind of helps a little bit, kind of like pausing and reflecting helps, but there's still, I find, a lot of the same kind of expectations. We'll get into that a little bit more, of just like this hurry up offense, and then you get into the rhythm of, the job, the family, and you're like a midlife crisis happens because you never actually spent time learning yourself. So going back to the relationship, so your daughter is born, you're starting to kind of see the inconsistencies. Talk me through your mindset and what happened in the relationship.
Yeah, it started to, all the weight of raising a child fell on me. And I started, at first I thought that was okay because that's what happened to my mom. She was like, she's the person at home. She's the mother figure. Like that's how it's supposed to be. You know, I, my family's from the Caribbean. So like that Caribbean, like my grandmother was the same way. My great grandmother was the same way. It always fell on the mother figure. So like, I was like, okay, this is how it's supposed to be. And then I'm starting to realize, I'm like, well, he's also the dad. Yes, he is working, but he also has responsibilities. We both created life together. It's not just him bringing the financial piece. So that was a big part of it. And then having that conversation with him, saying he was receptive, but then never actually put it into action. And then part of it too was him. He started to develop he had, and I didn't realize it, but a substance abuse of alcohol. So like that also played a part into him not like managing his mental health, and then all of that extra stress that he was carrying, bringing into our relationship, bringing into the family dynamic. And it was kind of just like a roller coaster of like, he's doing better, they're supporting him, and then he kind of comes back down. So it was a roller coaster, and it definitely took a toll on our family dynamic. And then I kind of like before my son was born, I debated. I was like, well, do I want to stay here? Do I want another child? And I remember talking to a really good friend of mine, and it was like, well, she's like, if you get back out there and you start dating again, it's just like, I don't know the exact phrase, but it's like choose like the devil, and like, would you rather like stay where you're like, I'm not happy, but like, okay, or do I go back out and find someone who she's saying essentially worse? And I'm just like, okay. And this is someone who's like been in a very long relationship, has kids, and I'm just like, someone of trust. I'm like, oh, okay, well, maybe it's. And then that in my mind, I'm like, well, that's going to be too hard. And then I start thinking, I'm like, well, I don't have that financial means to leave. I wouldn't want to put my daughter through that, like all of these things. So I'm like, okay, well, I'll just stay and we see where it goes from there. And then that leads to like my son being born, his congenital heart defect, and then that really took a toll on everything. And then that's like where things in our relationship really took a turn, and then we ended it like shortly after my son was born.
Ooh, so I need to sit back. I might need, something stronger than tea today. So this idea, this notion of the devil, and I've heard it, and I think I've even employed some of that. You'd rather stay in a situation that you know and the worst of it versus this unknown. Which, I mean, looking back, aren't you mad?
Yeah.
Aren't you mad? Because it's like, I mean, the only thing I can rely on is me, and the only truth is the truth of you, and what you have to rely on is your abilities. And I think that's so interesting, and I feel like a lot of women have that mentality, not even in a relationship. It's just like in a situation in your job. It's just like this notion of just staying, and I think it's really comfortability. I don't know if you feel differently about just like, well, I'm comfortable here, and change for better or worse is just hard. And I think maybe a couple of weeks ago, I posted on social around like choosing your hard, because it's hard to stay, right? It's hard to stay in a relationship when you share that you needed a level of financial support. I don't think your brain can like figure out like, well, how am I going to support myself? And then also too, there is this notion of like, doing this by yourself. And also too, well, who's going to want to be with someone with 2 kids? You know what I mean? So it's like all these
1000%,
conversations and narratives that are in your head. And so can you talk a little bit about like that tug of war that you were having in your head?
Yeah, it was. And at that time, even really when my daughter was born, and I'm sure you could probably attest to this too, I wasn't taking care of myself as a mom. Like I was putting the kids first. The kids came first all the time, 24/7.
Yeah.
I probably had uh depression like after they were born, and like, you
Mm-hmm.
know, my mental space wasn't so that also played into it. It's just like
Yeah.
I'm not in a space at all to get up and leave even though I need to.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yeah.
just like it to take that extra effort that I don't have
Mm-hmm.
is taxing. So like at
Mm-hmm.
that point I wish I realized that I was in that and ebbing and flowing through that like depressive state, and I
Yeah.
gotten like help from a therapist to say
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, this is what you're feeling, and like how to help myself get out of it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
A lot of it too kind of comes from like shame that the relationship doesn't
Mm-hmm.
work out, because again, I came from a two family household. No matter if they had a good day, bad day, they're still together. They're still the
Yeah.
image of them being a two family household. So I'm like, if I leave, then I'm just a single mom, and I'm single black mom on top of it. So like it's just like all the stereotypes that come along with it. And like being from a Caribbean household is like, again, it's like, was that the image that you want to portray? Is that the image that you want for your daughter? Like you have to think about your kids. So it's like when you say thoughts, there's like so many things that were going through
Mm-hmm.
my head
Mm-hmm.
that just made me stay. And then looking
Yeah.
back on it now, I'm just like valid. Like I give myself grace
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
for everything that I had to go through. But at the same time, like you said, you can choose your heart. Like
Mm-hmm.
I choose a heart that brings me peace at some point.
Mm. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, back then there were so many things that were going through my head
Mm-hmm.
of why I decided to stay and do that. I remember speaking with someone else, and I had asked like, you know, how do you manage this? Like, how do you do this?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was just like, oh yeah, you just have to like stroke his ego, and then you know you make him feel, you know. And then like it felt weird, and I'm like, I'm not, I can't do that.
Mm-hmm.
He also has to
Mm-hmm.
be responsible. I have to tell him
Accountable.
like, you know, how, you know, yeah, accountable. Like I have to share how I'm feeling. I have to
Yeah.
share, you know, what's going on in this relationship. He's also a part of it. I
Mm-hmm.
can't just, you know, cater to him. He's not my third child. We're
Mm-hmm.
not doing this.
I love that. I love that. In you play tennis with yourself and you
Mm-hmm.
realize that the hard because it's transparently and I don't want to pretend and I also don't want to feel as though we're casting judgment on the women who decide to stay
No.
or are
Yeah.
in the situation.
Mm-hmm.
But for you, what was the deciding factor in choosing this like the leaving, choosing the breaking up? Like what drove that decision?
So there was a point where, because of his like drinking, his substance abuse
Yeah.
became physical. So like at
Okay.
that point, it was enough. Enough was enough. I
Mhm.
had enough of the like the mental, the verbal,
Mhm.
just like
Mhm.
abuse that was happening, and now there's like
Mhm.
this physical component. And on top of it, interestingly enough, this happened during COVID.
Okay.
Well, it's like COVID is still happening, but like the height
Mhm.
of when everything happened, the
I got
shutdown.
you. Yeah.
So at that point, you know, I'm separated from everyone. You're separated from your friends, your family. So it's just you and this other person. And for
Mhm.
the longest, I didn't think that I could do this by myself. So being
Mhm.
isolated, and him, so he wouldn't come home sometimes. So
Mhm.
I'm like, I'm doing this. I'm raising the kids. I am working. I'm doing all of this by myself. I'm like, I don't
Mhm.
need him. I don't need anybody right now. Like I'm
Mhm.
that realization of like that fear that I had, like let that go. And then on top of it, like I said, on top of it, like I'm not gonna sit in an abusive relationship and then
Yeah.
having my kids see that.
Yeah.
So I want to be mindful of like my daughter, and she just came to mind, both of my kids. I would never
Yeah.
want to see them in that position. So yeah, those were the driving factors, but it really was just like the realization that I can do this by myself. So why am I here? Like I need to leave. Goodbye.
Well, I'm so proud of you for one coming to that realization and then putting, action behind it. But I do realize, and I think for our listeners, you can do things by yourself. You
Mm-hmm.
do have the strength to do it. I think it's a matter of just figuring out logistically how can it work and you have a community, i.e. Live, to be able to help you through that. But also too, Zoe was not married. She was living with someone and in the midst of, I would say, dire circumstances, because I remember COVID vividly about just
Mm-hmm.
how everyone was feeling. And I think for women specifically, when you start to realize like, oh, I've been doing this and I
Mm-hmm.
can do it this, your perspective shifts. So it's really and truly for the person who's kind of stuck, like ask like perspective driving questions that are going to help open up your mind. And I think that I think was even for me when I recognized and realized, well, it was time to divorce. And I was afraid of doing it by myself, but I also realized emotionally, I've been carrying the weight of it all for so long that I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
well, how much harder could it be? You know what I mean? It's just kind
Right.
of planning, obviously. But I mean, well, shouts to you for the courage, but also to the bravery, because it takes courage. It takes courage to choose, and then it takes courage to act on that. And also to, it takes time. So talk me through the time frame of like, and I know there were ebbs and flows and there was physical implications as well, but what was that time frame for you between kind of like, I'm unhappy, you had your friend, and then like, oh, this isn't, I can't do this. This is crazy. I'm out. Do you have like a time frame? I know you said COVID was, so that's what, 2020. Yep, 2020.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I would say that was, my son was born in 2019.
Mhm.
So around that time,
Mhm.
it took me about 2 years. So
Mhm.
2020 to 2021. So about 2 years to kind of like really like figure it out. Like, okay,
Yeah.
this is like what needs to happen. Again, just because it's you have all these thoughts of like, how am I going to do this? What am I going to do? And at that point, I remember telling my family, I told no one about what was going on. No one.
No, why was that? Shame again?
Shame, yeah. It was just
Yeah.
like, how'd you get yourself in this position? How'd you choose this
Mm.
person? Again, going back to like, I chose this person. That was my thinking at the time, and not like this person. This is how this person's acting.
Mm.
It's not my responsibility for their actions. But at that time, my thought was like,
Mhm.
okay, I chose this person. I chose to have 2 children with this person. I chose this
Yeah.
life. So it's like, it's my responsibility to fix it. Like, I shouldn't have to run to anybody for help. I shouldn't have to run to anybody for assistance, but not realizing like the importance of community, the importance of family,
Yeah.
and exactly why you have this platform. That is a driving force, and can be a driving force for a lot of women to get that additional support if they do feel isolated, if they do feel alone, if they do feel shame. So for me, that last piece was, I told my family, and I remember this was actually over a period of maybe about a year or 6 months or so. I can't remember the exact time
Yeah.
period, but I told my family. At first they were kind of like, okay, well, see if you guys could work it out, or maybe, maybe you're being difficult. It was kind of like that conversation until they saw it for themselves. And then it was like, okay, we see what you're talking about. Like, we need to get you out of here. So like, come live with us. Then that's the point where it's like, okay, now I have the family support, and they understood what was happening.
Interesting. Okay, let's park here for a little bit because you just said something that I think is crucial. They saw it for themselves, which isn't it like I've been telling y'all, like because
Mm-hmm.
I'm petty that
Yeah.
way. I'm like, I
Yeah.
told y'all he was nuts. No. But
Mm-hmm.
what, let me just, because my mind is just like racing with all the questions. So you share with them, and I just want to say I see you in the feeling of the shame, because I will say, and I was married for 14 years, and from year 1 to year 5 there were things that I was feeling in my mind that I didn't tell a soul, because I felt
Mm-hmm.
like, well, I chose this and I have to deal with it and this is my choice. And it was such a lonely place to be because you feel so isolated and you feel like people are going to judge. So I completely like, I felt seen in you saying that I wasn't nuts in that. And then two, once you finally got the courage to share, I wish there's a better way that people are like, well, can't you bear? Because once I started talking to people about it, I mean, there are friends that like understood and were there with me and had no judgment. And there were friends who were like, girl, leave. And then there were friends who were like, well, it's not that bad. And it's not that bad. Just as like, oh, you want me to suffer.
Yeah.
You want
True.
like I'm telling you something, you want me to be in pain, like just that's huge. And for our listeners
Mm-hmm.
who are feeling that, I mean, they're your homies, but you do need individuals. I think a diverse thought and diverse perspective is important, but love shouldn't hurt. I mean,
No.
yes, there's tough times, but it shouldn't.
Mm-hmm.
If you feel like you're hurt, that's a flag that something is off, and
Yeah.
you are not alone. You do have to share, and even when you share, you have to share with people who've earned your vulnerability. right?
Yeah, that piece.
Because if until I felt safe to actually unravel, you know what I mean? I think there's a level of just
Mhm.
like even identifying your friendships and your friends who are going to come along and do life with you. And the other question I had in the figuring of the how, you kind of started answering it like when you talked to your family saw that you were not in a safe place and they said, come live with me. How did that feel to you when they said that?
It's a range of emotions
Yeah.
because relief, right? Because now
Mhm.
I'm getting up and leaving. But I felt a little bit defeated because
Mm,
I was leaving um, the home that my kids were in. Like
mhm,
I felt he should have been the one to leave
mhm,
and not me.
mhm.
And it's something like looking back on it now, I felt like I would have fought harder to get
Mm,
him to go, for me to
okay.
keep the space and, where the kids were thriving and where I was
Yeah,
thriving and the school system that we were in. And like, that's where, I mean, I figured out a way to still keep the kids in the school system, but like, just
yeah,
that was our
yeah,
home. That was our home.
yeah,
But at the same
yeah.
time, it was time for that chapter to close. So it's
Mhm,
kind of like, it was a range of different emotions. And then I
mhm,
kind of felt like, again, defeated because I'm like, oh, I'm living back at home, like with
mhm,
my parents, and I have two kids with
mhm,
me. And then there's that shame coming back up, the guilt of the
mhm.
kids of like, now I've stripped them of their father.
Yeah. Oh,
There's
so
so
many.
many feelings because they have a bunch of questions. Or like, why isn't daddy here? When are we going to see daddy? Or like, why are we living with Nana and Grampy? And like, there's so many questions that they have. So as you're like managing your own feelings and trying to navigate how you're feeling and what you're going to do, then you
Yeah,
have your kids, and then I had the also dynamic of my parents being like, so what's the plan? What's the I mean, of course
yeah,
they would have had me for however long, but they were just like,
yeah.
so what are you
So
gonna
what
do?
do you?
Yeah,
Yeah,
what's like.
yeah. So what was the plan? And well, before we even get into the plan, I just want to just big shouts to you on working through because those are big words you threw around: defeated, shame, guilt, and all those are real big emotions and feelings, and your courage to kind of say that out loud, but also to it is what it is the reality of when you make a hard choice to you're breaking up a home. In a sense, you're breaking up safety, you're breaking up a family unit. There is this level of guilt that you feel. I want y'all to listeners to know that that's actually normal. And sit in. I'm going to put my therapist hat on because this is what my therapist tells me. Sit in that feeling and breathe through it. And in my mind, I'm like, I'm not really trying to sit and breathe through
No.
nothing. I want it to go away. But I do think I think we need to normalize this notion of these are real emotions that you're going to feel, and it's a little bit
Mm-hmm.
weird if you're not feeling guilt and shame. Something else is going on there. But
Yeah.
when you're making these hard choices, you're thinking about all of the implications: what your kids are going to say, what are people going to
Mm-hmm.
say, what are you saying. And so like I want to normalize that exact idea of all of it. All of it is normal. Your
Yeah.
feelings are valid in a sense. And I also want to say sit in it, journal it out or write it out if you're not a journaler, video diary, because you're gonna get to a place when you recognize and you unpack some of those feelings, and it's gonna get better. But I wanted to put a pin in that because those are true. And I think some people also too are afraid to deal with or name some of that. Would you
Mm-hmm.
agree? Because this is kind of like it's the reality of uncoupling. It's the reality. This word uncoupling is also hilarious, but it's the reality of breakups, you know?
Yeah.
And I've met friends who are like, yeah, I'm good. I'm like, are you really good? Because you were in a relation for a minute and you give
Mm-hmm.
them a space or whatever, but normalizing this idea that is going to hurt and it's going to hurt for some time is what I desperately want people to understand. So anyway, going back to, okay, so what's the plan? So you make this decision, you now move home. What were you thinking during that time and how did you come up with a plan?
Yeah, I did. Honestly, I did not come up with a plan. Like, it was just kind of like, I'm gonna have to, I just know financially was the
Mhm.
biggest piece, right? I
Mhm.
I would need a place to stay. So financially that was my top priority.
Okay.
At the time, he was the breadwinner. He had the money that was coming in to support the home and everything. So I was like, okay, well, I'm at my parents. I have an opportunity to save. They weren't charging me rent or anything, or so it was like, okay, I have opportunity to save. I still had the kids too that I was financially responsible for, but like being at my parents was a big help. I at that time I was just like, I'm gonna get a new job. The job that I had wasn't happy with to begin with, and then also wasn't happy, but it wasn't paying well also. So like there was growth there that needs to happen. So I decided looking for a new job. I had tons of interviews, and this was over like a period of like 7 to 8 months, which in the moment felt like forever. But now looking back on it, that was like a very quick turnaround. And the job that I happened to get gave me double my salary. Yeah, when I say like blessing, like I can't even like. So again, it's just like all this goes back to stepping outside your comfort zone. Not remaining in something simply because you're comfortable with it. So like we're talking, yes, this is all about relationships, but in that small piece of that was also about my job. I had been at that job for 9 years, and I was comfortable because it let me flexibility, I had flexibility with the kids and stuff like that. So stepping outside of that, and like stepping into the unknown and kind of just like seeing what could happen from there. So I ended up getting the financial means that I needed. I ended up getting the support from my family so that I can support, around like watching the kids, being there for the kids, valid. That kind of support. I started doing therapy. So it was like trusting myself, giving myself the courage, tackling everything that I had and unboxing everything that I had been holding on to, or just like, you throw it deep inside of you so it never sees the light of day. Having all of that come up. Yeah, having all of that come up. So like all of these factors kind of like pushed me, and I guess they were a part of a bigger plan, but I just didn't realize it at the time. So it was like, okay, so now I got my financial means, I have like my family support. Okay, what am I doing for my self-care and how I can navigate going through like all of these feelings that we just talked about and separating from the children's father, and how can I also support my children? So I put them in therapy. My daughter at the time, my son was too small. All of these pieces that I guess talking to you now, we're a part of a bigger plan. Let's focus on who we are as a whole. Let me focus on each aspect of like centering myself. So that's my environmental, my social, my mental, my health. Not to mention, sorry, I'm getting a little off topic, but just talking about health. When I was in the relationship, when I tell you I had so much stomach problems.
Really?
I went to the doctor several times. I thought I had, I don't know, some type of gastro.
Self-diagnosing yourself?
Yeah, I thought I had something. I went to the doctor. They were like, nothing. I was having such heartburn. It was just like constant, to the point I was having pain where I couldn't even sit up in a chair. I had to lay down. On some days, it was really bad. So I thought legit there is a medical explanation as to what is going on. And come to find out that all of that is just tied to like my mental health and the space that I was in and who I was around. Because when I left that space, I have not had an issue since. I have not had those same like debilitating stomach pains that I would get over and over again. And so like also a part of that and me leaving the situation was because I'm listening to myself now. I'm listening to how all of this is affecting my body. I'm listening and paying attention to me and like how I'm responding physically, and then what's going on in my head mentally and emotionally.
Girl, Zoe, I was taking notes because there's some bars that you spit that I want to just have you listen to, because this is part, I think, therapy for you as well. When I asked you, did you have a plan? You said, I didn't have a plan. I just figured it out. But even now, as I'm listening to you share your story, and even for the listener, sometimes I found that in order to propel forward, you have to go backwards, and that's okay. And the example you provided was like, well, I had to go back home for a little bit to figure out in a safe way. Well, one, you left an unsafe environment, you got safe. And then two, but it feels like you're going backwards. And at that time, I'm sure you're like, you didn't know that you were going to land the job, but there's this narrative that we have in our head that going back could mean many different things, but you chose to go back home. And I'll share a story. I was listening to a woman who talked about climbing a mountain, and I think she was climbing Kilimanjaro. Child, name the high mountain for this point. But in a climber's journey, because of altitude sickness, in order to go higher, you have to go to below the altitude that the human body can function, get fine, and then go up. In that story that you just shared, or your example you gave, it's the same kind of thinking that in order to get to higher, in order to get to better, you have to get to base, get your body, get your mind centered, and then you can propel higher or you can propel forward. So that is one thing that you said. The second thing that you said was you had to allow yourself time, and you were comfortable in your 9-year job, and you realized this ain't going to be, I can't rely on comfortability to get better. I can't rely on comfortability to get a job that's going to sustain and keep me and my kids. And I think people think it's going to happen fast. Get that out your mind. Like, your timetable is your timetable. And I think people compare. That's one of the things I hate about social media, is because you see someone's like amazing edited social reel and think that's real. No, no, no. Your timetable is your timetable. And then like this idea that you said about paying attention to yourself means knowing and trusting your gut. And a lot of people talk about that. And even for myself, I didn't know the inner thinking and the inner thoughts in my conscious. I didn't know that person to trust that person. So I had to get to know inner child, whatever we want to call it, and trust that, oh, that's my gut. And then learning that little voice is your gut, and then trusting that little voice. And it comes with slowing down. It comes with paying attention. Because I think we get into this rhythm of life, school, job, next. We don't pause to reflect and get to know ourselves. And then you said the thing about your health, it tied to your mental health. I think people don't realize and recognize how vital it is that your mental health is tied to everything in your body. You could have told me I thought I had heart defects, because my chest, when I realized I had to separate from my marriage, it felt like someone was stepping on my chest. Like I went to doctors because I was like, no, like, no, something is wrong with me. And they asked me all these questions. I was like, yeah, my job is stressful, and yeah, I'm working out, but I still couldn't shake this feeling of like, it felt like I was dying. And so, but it was because of stress and all the things I was working out in my head. I wasn't talking it out. I wasn't in therapy. And it was impacting all of me. And so I talk about the fact that when you're in a separation or when you're in a divorce, it happens to the whole person. People only think it's like one piece of it. No, it impacts everything. So I just want to say to you that while you didn't realize you had a plan, but hindsight now shows that you had some level of framework or some level of a blueprint in you. Kudos to you for that courage, right? And stepping out of your comfort zone and identifying financial, identifying family support, identifying self-care, and then also to providing support for your kids. So that's amazing. Now, when you were kind of searching and looking for your out and your next, you're with your families, what sources did you look up, like online, or like where did you go to get your information?
That was difficult. It was hard. Especially because I wanted to, with the separation, there was there were some things involved, like the house, and like, so I wanted a lawyer with the kids and the parent plan and like how that worked. I wanted a lawyer. So like that was a lot. That was difficult to manage, because I'm like, who do I trust? Who do I go to? And I wanted specifically, I thought that would be good, is to have a Black female as my representative as a lawyer. I felt that I'd be heard and valued and trusted in that relationship, because I wanted to make sure that my lawyer understood like what was going on. And I ended up having issues with the lawyer. Nothing really came of it. Still to this day, scared to like find out and get another lawyer, because I'm just like, I don't want to be in the
Yeah.
same position where it's like, I have
Mm-hmm.
a limited amount of money that I'm going to
Yeah.
put towards this. And
Yeah.
I would like it to be, the services that I'm asking for, the services that I'm expecting,
Yeah.
you know, for it to be utilized. And I felt like taking
Yeah.
advantage in that situation. Um,
Can you share a little bit more about what happened with the lawyer, and mainly because for anyone who's in the similar situation trying to figure out like what happened with as much as you feel comfortable sharing, obviously, what happened
yeah.
with the lawyer, if you don't mind me
Yeah.
asking.
So this was, I never met her in person. It was all like through the phone,
Mm-hmm.
which is fine. She did like the first intake, said, don't worry. Like she heard everything that I had to say.
Yeah.
Then I gave her the retainer for everything.
Mm-hmm.
And so what her services encompassed was, creating a parent plan,
Yeah.
and being like a mediator, or going to mediation for the child support and
Yeah.
child care, and her also establishing the child support that he's responsible for.
Mm-hmm.
So all those things. So he also, so when the court date came up, she kept postponing it. She was like, oh, we'll postpone. We need some more information. I need to get some more information from him. And I was like, okay. I'm like, this is a thing. And
Yeah.
then I think it had been postponed maybe about 3 times.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last time she's like, well, your retainer's up at this point. So, here's the sheet that we worked on, and like pretty much good luck. And she's like, well, all you have to do is just take the sheet, file it with
Court system.
the court system under the family division.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, ugh. Still at that point I was disappointed, because I'm like, okay, well, if you're
Yeah.
going to postpone it so many times, I would have told you to postpone it. I was like, let's go get this done. And
Yeah.
then I just wasn't realizing, putting two and two together, that every time it was being postponed, it was taking up money out of the retainer.
Mm-hmm.
And she wasn't really providing the service. She was just, waiting until it was up, and then just saying, here, it's all on you now.
Mm-hmm.
So then when I took the document to the court was like, oh, she filed in the wrong unit, because it was a domestic violence case. It should have been under domestic violence. And they were like, she should, as a lawyer, she should have known that. She filed under family. So then I would have to file it all over again.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
By myself.
Yep.
And what I didn't want to do, the work by myself. And that's why I got a lawyer too. So,
Exactly.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
But that is actually a very common problem, and I actually am talking to a couple of individuals who are going to help unpack, because some people can't afford a lawyer and they have to do
Yeah.
it themselves. And again, you said a huge thing that I found. Like I just went on Google to find lawyers in my area, and I'm in New
Mm-hmm.
Jersey. And like I sent a prayer and was like, okay, I guess I'm just gonna close my eyes and pick one.
Yeah.
And I didn't find them to be any kind of helpful. It felt I didn't know if I could trust them. It also felt like, I guess this, even though you feel that like this is off, but you don't know because they're the lawyers, they're the
No,
professionals,
exactly.
right? So no, I mean I'm sorry that happened, but again, it happens so much. Again, something people aren't talking about is like
Mm-hmm.
how to find and how to know.
Yeah.
That's actually going to be like how to know you have a good lawyer. What some of the
Yes.
things they should be asking you for, and what are some of the signals that like this person ain't right. So I'm hoping the situation kind of fixed itself and you figured that out. But thank you for sharing a little bit more about that. And so you ended up, I'm guessing, figuring out the filing situation, and that is done. Like, can talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So actually,
Mm-hmm.
I went in the process of wanting to file, and I was up in
Mm-hmm.
North Jersey at the time.
Mm-hmm.
But I had already signed a lease to move to South Jersey, because I thought
Okay.
this was all going to be wrapped up. Like, she got the
Yeah.
document, we're
You had
all
your
going to
plan.
court. I didn't even think about, like, well, what if it's not? So came down
Mm.
to South Jersey. And so they're telling me, well, we've ended virtual visits. You have to come in person.
Ugh.
And I'm like, how am I going to do this commuting from like South Jersey? So what someone else recommended, they said, if I can get the kid's father to agree to what the terms were on that document, and for him to follow without having to go to the court, she's like, you can try doing that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what we have in place right now.
Yeah. So a
That's what's in
parenting plan.
that's what we have in place. So yeah, we didn't end up going to the court system,
Mm-hmm.
but if I did, I would have to commute back up to North Jersey
North Jersey.
to go in person. So it's a very clunky process, and the fact that you have to go in
Yeah.
person for like little bits of time, or sometimes like
All day.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, all day, just for like a little bit of time. You have to go and go through this process. It doesn't take into account, who has kids, who's holding the kids, who has the kids at that time, the jobs at that time. You're just like, and then again, all the things that's going on in your head as you're going through a separation. And I wish I did push a little bit more. I would push myself to be like, just go to court, like keep it moving. But a part of me is like, I did give up. I was just like, you know what?
Tired.
What we have in, yeah, I was like, what we have in the document, if you can agree to that, let's keep it moving. And he does pay the child support.
Lovely.
Our parent, I would say this one thing I would have pushed to the court to have like in the document is the parent time. The parent time with him kind of just is like all over the place because he's like, well, you're the main parent, so you can figure it out.
All that you're saying is this. So many women are experiencing what you're experiencing, and I think that I don't even want to go down the rabbit hole of the court system and understanding it. It is so clunky.
Yeah.
Everything you're saying is spot on because I felt like you need someone to tell you what to do, and figuring it out is so much more stress to you, the individual going through it. What level of support did you have? Let's kiki a little bit from like your friends and your family who were kind of like watching you do that. Like, were they like snippy, or what was that level of support or not support like?
Yeah, I'd say from my family, the support was them being able to like watch the kids for me when I needed to, and then vent to them to a certain degree, because I also found like when I vented to them, it was, it made them angry and upset. So then I had to like, which rightfully so, but then now you're listening to a layer of someone else's anger and you're like,
exactly.
oh, like I didn't. So they weren't the right person to vent to. And that's why I was like, okay, really, like this needs to be like a therapy thing, where I'm getting constructive like feedback back, or just being heard instead of like having to hear, someone else. At that time, because I didn't have the capacity to. But so that was family, and then as far as like friends, friends are really just there to like listen. Sometimes not sometimes. I think some of them just didn't grasp like the weight of it all, like how like now I don't look at myself. I've never really looked at myself as a victim of what happened. But I was talking to someone else recently, and she went through something similar, and I was explaining that to my friend, and she's like, "Well, that wasn't your story." I'm like, "That's the exact same story that I came from. I came from a relationship that was abusive." And she's like, "When you put it like that, she's like, I guess she's like, yeah. I mean, I've heard you talk about it so many times, and like, and then you just keep pushing through it, and you keep like moving forward." I'm like, "Yeah, but I'm like that was my situation, and that's where I was in at that time." So I feel like them not understanding really truly the immensity of like what I went through and what it took to get out of it. Because like one of my friends, she's like, "Well, you kept pushing," and she's like, "You made it look so like it was fine," and I'm like, "But it wasn't." I was like, it definitely was not fine. Like nothing was fine. There was times where like I cried, and talking about crying, like I was the type of person who would like, oh, I can't let anybody see me cry. Like, no, I couldn't let anybody see emotions from me. So I think that was also part of it, is that no one really also got to grasp that from me, because the amount of emotions that I was putting out, or I didn't know how to communicate how I was feeling to them. It just kind of came over as like a robotic, like, this is what's happening. And there was really no feeling behind it of truly like how deeply it hurt me, how deeply it hurt to see my kids. And like we talked about the words like grief of that relationship, and like what's the fear of the unknown in the future and things like that. So
no, I think this trope about the strong Black woman, and
just because so many people have, my dad has said it, he's like, "Well, you're a strong woman, you'll get through this." I'm like, "But I don't want to be strong. I don't want to be strong." I was like, "Why do I have to be strong?" Yeah.
I'll just let that. I don't have a response, because I will say there is an assumption that we are strong, and you don't want to go through this. And I think a part of it too, I think even as we think about just American culture, that's an expectation. Girl, just buckle up. Which, I mean, you figured it out, you realize what you had to do, but in the sense of that, you almost had to like numb yourself to
Mm-hmm.
the feelings to be able to push through. And I wish people shared and talked a little bit more about yes and two things can be
Mm-hmm.
true. Yes, I could be broken into many, many pieces and have to figure it out and hold space for both of those to be true. If I go back to my experience, I could say the same. Like I mean, I definitely had my moments of like unraveling, but I do think there's a sense of like, let me not show all of it. Let me not unravel too much in front of my friends because I don't know if a friend has the capacity or to
Yes.
hold that. But also sometimes you can't control when grief comes and having a space to be able to unravel in a safe manner.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I'm gonna say. Well, I want to switch now to almost kind of like your new love story.
Yeah.
Instilling hope because you got out of that. Kudos to you. But talk about your life now. Talk about, what you've learned about yourself in going through that process.
Yeah, I want to learn is like a lot. I learned so much about myself, just being alone and like sitting with myself,
Mhm.
learning like what I'm capable of.
Yeah.
Um, Therapy has helped me like express like those, like I said, kind of at first of having that like robotic kind of like response to everything, like really
Mhm.
get in touch to like where these feelings were coming from, the
Yeah.
grief that I was experiencing. So, like you said, sitting in those feelings, I did a lot of journaling. I listened to, there's a podcast that I was listening to, and she had like videos on YouTube, and it kind of just talked about like mind and body.
Mhm.
And then I ended up getting my master's in integrative and complementary health. That was like a part of my healing journey because
Mhm.
I was so interested and tied into like that mind body connection.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like that helped me understand a lot of like your mental health plays such an important role in what manifests in your body,
Mhm.
and how to listen to yourself, how to trust your intuition. So, like, once I found all that stuff, I started doing self care. Like, self care is a routine in my life, it is a must. Like, I will
Mhm.
take time out of the day, even if it's just the kids and I. I'm like, hey, mommy's gonna go do meditation for like 10 minutes. I just need a minute to like breathe and like, and now I can pass
Mhm.
those things along to them and they
Yeah.
can do that,
Huge.
integrate it into like their self care and things like that. For me, I realized I don't have to sacrifice it all. I don't.
Mm.
I can still have me. I can still be fully present and entertain and be the person I want to be, and have the purpose, be aligned in the purpose that I see, like my life's purpose and what I want to do and what I want to achieve. And I don't have to sacrifice that. Because being in a
Mm.
relationship, I thought I had to sacrifice. We talked about this earlier, and I remember wanting to come back to this sacrifice. You want to sacrifice for your partner, you want to sacrifice for the family. And like, yes, there's like certain decisions, maybe like, maybe where you're living, someone wants to live north and you want to live
Yeah.
south and you have to sacrifice to live in the middle. Fine. That's
Mhm.
something, as long as like you still have things that don't take away from who you are as a person,
Mhm. Mhm.
if that makes sense what I'm getting at. But like,
Yeah.
I don't want to, no longer do I sacrifice anymore that anything that would compromise me as a person, that would compromise
Mhm.
my self care, compromise my values, compromise
Huge.
boundaries. In therapy, I learned about what's the boundary? What's a rule? What are things that like I firmly stand on, and what are things that I have flexibility in? What are
Mhm.
things that are
Mhm.
like really foundational, and
Yeah.
like I put those up. I put those up for friends. I put those up for family. I put those up in relationships. Like, it's funny, really quickly, when I was dating, I'm kind of like thinking of like, I need to do a survey because you need to like follow all these things before you go on a first date. Like, I need to know all these things. Like, you need to fill out
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
Google form. Like, and
My
based off of your
goodness.
response, based off of these responses, like, then we'll talk about it. But
Yeah.
like, really putting myself first and like all the time, even for the kids. I
Mhm.
will put myself first because if I don't put myself first, then I can't pour into them. And I would want them to do the same thing for themselves.
Mhm. Yeah.
I think, and my daughter sees a lot of sacrifice that I've done, but I told her, I was like, listen, yes, I do these for you guys, but you also have to put yourself first. You have to
Mhm.
put yourself first. And then this way you can pour into everybody else. And that's exactly what I'm doing.
Yeah.
But yeah, just finding myself along the way. And it
So good.
shifts and it changes, and some days are better than others.
Yeah.
But like on the days that I find it difficult, it's like I'm recognizing what's happening. Oh, okay, it's difficult because XYZ, like I'm feeling the weight of everything that's going on because I am having to be a single mom and cook dinner and clean and cook. And I'm like, that means I need a break. Let me just like, take a break. Like at least I'm recognizing and I can
Mhm.
identify and then address it.
That's, I mean, I felt like if there was a person behind us putting words up, the phrase that kind of hit me and resonated is, I don't have to sacrifice it all. It's
Mm-hmm.
huge because I do think, and maybe it's because of our upbringing where there's a level of like, and it's tied to people pleasing. And if you would
Yeah.
ask
Oh, yeah.
me, am I a people pleaser? My answer is a hell nah.
Yeah.
However, my actions said differently. I killed myself to make something happen, or I killed myself to please someone else or to please
Mm-hmm.
others and not even realize that I'm killing myself until I'm dead on the street. And then my inner self is like, well, you put yourself there, right? So this notion of self-care being selfish, no, self-care is not selfish. Even to the like feeding my kids. How usually if you cook, you serve them first and you eat the
Mm-hmm.
leftovers. No, I
Oh, yeah.
intentionally now serve myself
Mm-hmm.
first. And then y'all get from after, right? So these
Mm-hmm.
small little things, it's almost kind of like a tool that I use to be like, girl, yourself first, right?
Yeah.
And I think that goes back to, and that's why I always like to start with the upbringing because that's something that's learned. That's a
Oh,
learned
yeah.
behavior that we see. I think so. Can you believe it's been an hour of our
Ah.
conversation? I know, and like I feel like I can go on and on and on, but like
Mhm.
I mean, I felt like we can stop there, but if there's anything else you want to share as it relates to, and I like to close with a lived truth, like based on your experience, and again, you weren't married, but you yourself
Mhm.
said that it felt like I got divorced because you had to separate.
Yeah.
What would you say is the one thing you want listeners to take away after listening to this episode?
I would say truly and honestly listening to yourself. Sometimes that little voice, or it could be like a physical manifestation in your body,
Mm-hmm.
but like getting to know yourself so that you can listen to yourself because you are the only person that knows what's best for you. You
Mm-hmm.
are the person, like, if you don't advocate for you, no one else is going to advocate for you.
That's facts.
Finding the space, and it is difficult, it is hard. When I look back at the journey that I've been on, like, it's easy to talk about now, but if you had to ask me this back then, like, yo, go take
Mm-hmm.
care of yourself, I'm like what does that
What are you
mean?
talking about? Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
so you mean like
yeah.
go to the spa? Like, even if you took increments of your day, little bits of your day, to find something that brought joy to your day, or found
Mm-hmm.
something that helped you release something that you were holding on to. It could be a salt bath, it could be journaling, it could be going to therapy, it could be a walk in nature, it could be anything that you can find. It can be going to a class, a kickboxing class, anything to
Mm-hmm.
release anything that's holding on that's not yours, and to step into you and who you are
Mm-hmm.
is going
Yeah.
to help you find and listen to your intuition. And I think that's the biggest piece, because and even in relationships, but also in friendships, you're going to be able to
Mm-hmm.
identify, okay, this person is not for me, or this
Mm-hmm.
situation is not for me.
Yeah, yeah. You're so good because I was gonna say, well, what getting to know yourself? Like, girl, how? Like, what do you mean by that? But you kind of listed a few things about just journaling and going for walks. I think a big piece too for my listener who's like, well, girl, I feel like I know myself, or like, how do you get to a place where you feel like you do? I sometimes, if I'm in a situation and something is bothering me, I've had to force myself to ask why
Mm-hmm.
and then ask why. Like why 7 times to get to the root of it. And many times, either I was triggered by a past experience or
Yep.
there's something that I didn't realize or recognize. And then once you identified why, you unpack, well, what do I do with that feeling and that the information now that I have it? Is it a boundary I need to set? We talked a lot about that. Is
Mm-hmm.
it a reshifted mindset? And that's
Mm-hmm.
how you get to knowing yourself. And also too, like, this isn't popular, but like shutting off the socials and shutting off the
Mm-hmm.
music. And sometimes I'm
Yeah.
driving, it's quiet, I'm playing back thoughts, I'm playing back scenarios and really internalizing what in that situation made me react the way I react. Going for walks in quiet, getting close to myself is the practice that I want all of us who are listening or are part of the community to get good at, because that's how you're going to, not saying you're going to, you're going to not dismiss some of those red flags, whether it's internal things you got to work on or relationships or even the job, but you're not going to know unless you get quiet. And people don't like that. People don't like sitting in quiet. You want to be distracted. No, get quiet, because that's how you're going to learn.
When you said getting to like know yourself and like sitting in the quiet, it just brought me back to like, so I am neurodivergent. I have ADHD, and I only realized this later on. So like some of the things that you'll see that as a person who is neurodivergent and being in a relationship could also be very different in your perception of what's going on in the relationship and your reactions in the relationship. So like for anyone who is neurodivergent or is curious, I would say either go get the diagnosis or like just it's something to be mindful of when you're in a relationship. It's like, okay, I'm showing up because of this, and this is how I respond to, and is my partner receptive to that? Does my partner really understand that too? Yeah.
Well, Ms. Zoe, thank you for your courage and your bravery. Thank you for sharing your story. I recognize being vulnerable is really, really tough and hard. So I applaud your courage. And for my listeners, I hope you were able to take away some nuggets to apply. And I just want to encourage you all to keep going and keep pushing. And you can do hard things. And cheers to living. Take care, everybody.